So the homework this week was, do I want to see fortune cookies? No. They're interesting shapes and interesting forms, and they have wonderful reflective lights on them. So they're interesting models. So the thing that I see that happened to you is that you got really involved with the multicolored fortune cookie, more so than the lighting and shadowing effect. Now, last time we had a critique, you got rave reviews from myself because it was really about lights and shadows. Here you kind of lost a little bit and got busy with the uniqueness of this. Now, what would have been really awesome is that when I look at your painting, I'm aware of a multicolored fortune cookie. And what would have been awesome is to look at it and say, oh, fortune cookies, look at how beautiful. Oh my God, they're multicolored. I didn't know that. And so if it were like an act, but see, you kind of emphasize the colors and not the effects. And so consequently, people see these shrimp, these forms. Another thing, how long did this take you to paint? Yeah, so, reasonably, I've had students that have sat in front of these fortune cookies for, doing one or two and be absolutely overwhelmed with how hard they are to draw. And so another thing I would have suggested is to probably do less fortune cookies, so one or two as opposed to several. Now, the thing with this is one of my rules with painting is not to paint things bigger than life size, right? Don't paint things bigger than life size. Like don't paint a head bigger than life size. But it's interesting with fortune cookies, you can paint them gigantic and people know that it's always something small. Rarely do you see a fortune cookie big. They do make them, but rarely, they're not. So most people have kind of an attachment to fortune cookies that they're a certain size. So these are the few things that you can actually paint bigger than life size and get away with it. So you do have the fortunes in there. You do have them piled up. I think you just absolutely cram too much in there not to give yourself a chance. One or two. In fact, I think, and this is kind of your forte, but in a way, and this painting didn't work for you, one of your fortes or your styles is that you really fill the surface with textures. And what would have been real interesting is that such a small, intimate cookie like this. Remember how I said you got to be kind of present? This is exactly like my talk right before we started about really, analyzing your subject matter and ask yourself, what is it that I want to say or do? And these little fortune cookies actually hold a lot of magic. And actually, when you go to a Chinese restaurant, you normally only get one, and you almost go like, damn, I wish I had another one. It's almost like, excuse me, could I have another fortune cookie? It's like, because sometimes you're in the mood for a fortune cookie. One thing about fortune cookies is that they break. And they have this wonderful little thing that we look forward to. It's always a surprise. And so part of the fortune cookie is the reward. It's like a box of Cracker Jacks is special because it has a shitty surprise inside. But you always wonder, maybe this time I'll get something in plastic. It's like there's always that possibility. So if we were to put in a relationship to a fortune cookie, that would be a relationship that I would sit and ponder for a while. Not be enthralled with trying to fill my plate with all kinds of multicolored fortune cookies, but to actually maybe just have an empty table with a fortune cookie on it that's broken. That would probably say a lot. Like, why didn't they take the fortune cookie? Maybe they don't like fortune cookies. Not everybody does. They break kind of interesting. Some people will break them and not eat them, So there's a lot of artistic things you can do with the model that spears or talks to the viewer. Remember, it's about communicating a thought of some kind that you have to the viewer. Or make them think and be involved with your piece, rather than just creating just a scene or a product of one. We're talking about elevating your artisticness. Take your artisticness to the next level and actually produce fine art. And fine art is, again, reevaluating what it is that we're painting and whether or not we can say something to the viewer. And as I'm telling you this stuff, you're like going, yeah, actually, I have a feeling when a fortune cookie comes to the table. And there is a feeling about breaking it, the anticipation. I rarely ever see anybody get a fortune cookie that doesn't at least break it open. I mean, it's almost like you can't help it. You have to. You have to break. You might be on a diet, and you might not eat, although if you're on a diet, not in a Chinese restaurant, but there's just something about that fortune cookie that you have to break it. You're not going to leave it on that bill by itself. Even if you're going to be able to say something and then say in bed afterwards just to get a good laugh out of it. But the thing is, there is that kind of play. And as an artist, you are in that realm of figuring out, what's the story here? You see how interesting it becomes? So imagine just a blank red tablecloth with one broken fortune cookie on it. And maybe the fortune was taken out. Maybe it's just left somewhere on that blank table. And you just have this empty space with a lost fortune on it.
Gonna be excited.
You don't know, maybe they ran out and bought a lottery ticket. Well, the thing is, are we more aware of the fortune cookies or the effect of light in this painting?
Light.
Yeah. Yeah. So the story that she's giving us isn't necessarily, and then she just kind of says, oh, well, and then she focused on the effect of light. So when you don't have a story or can't make it, the effect of light is always really, so like you look at that, the way that that's lit and the transition, it's like, obviously this is a plate, a family plate. They're getting like lots of fortunes here. And you can also say, look, my life is filled with all kinds of good fortunes because there's no such things as a bad fortune, right? So that we could read into that. But what ultimately, I don't even really care about the cookies, and I don't even go too far into it because I love this luscious light that's coming. And you bring that light from, is it the right, is this the angle that it's set up right?
It was a light that a little tiny light that I put right on the plate.
Yeah. The reason I ask is that it could go this way too. Yeah. Or it could go that way too. That's why I ask, because it's like, how did you intend it to be? Or you could just go put your name all the way on a 4-size and let the viewer like decide. That's an interaction painting. But you meant it to be this way. Okay. But look at how beautiful that lighting effect. And even like, this light, if she carried it out, would have taken it to the corner. And she purposely gave us this curve there. Like it's like a curve of a window or a little bit of a drape that might be blocking the light. But it just creates this little tension and this little feeling of that. I mean, we're more interested actually about what's going on outside of the picture than we are actually about the picture itself. So it's the lighting effect that makes it exquisite.
Glazing it, and I had a hard time with the glaze, and I was kind of unhappy with what was going on. It was ruining.
Okay, when you're getting a critique, don't offer your like, oh, I'm unhappy or I really like or whatever. When I ask you what were you thinking, just deal with that. Okay, and then when we go into the conversation, because what happens is that when you start talking about what you're unhappy with or what it's like all of a sudden people start looking for that. It's like, oh, it was so good until you said you screwed up, and it's like now they're looking for the screw up. And so like, and a lot of people won't find it. And so, if somebody's going to buy your painting, say, oh well, this is just a beautiful, but look at how bad I did that tree there. They're like, oh yeah, God, maybe I'm not going to buy it.
I cut out a little article that I found in Reader's Digest, and it right there on the table, and I just thought it was kind of interesting that fortune cookies are not a product of China at all.
No, they're not. Just like pizza as we know it is not American. Guess where the accordion was invented? San Francisco. So I was like,
Well, San Francisco still has a fortune cookie factory in China.
They do.
Where it always has been.
yeah, but I think the Chinese were smart enough that the Americans would buy anything. So we give you a fortune cookie and Anyway, beautiful. See, what I love about this is that, before you ruined it for me, what I love about it is this wonderful abstract feeling of the bag with almost virtually nothing, no lights and darks, and you didn't mull it over. It almost looks like you've just kind of tore a bag there. It's like it's there, we know it's there, we don't have to mull it over. And this wonderful depth, the feeling that the fortune cookies are more in the bag if you wish to choose. And then these fortunes falling out, and the one fortune cookie came out here. It's really nice, and the shapes that you've chosen and the way that you've worked the lights. Here again too, I'm really, I'm so fascinated with how beautiful the lighting effect in here is that for a second I forget they're fortune cookies. And they could be just like these wonderful diamonds, because the light is so beautiful, it's luminous. And so I get pulled away from that, and then I get pulled back, looking, oh no, it's a bag of fortune cookies. And your background is mimicking very similar to the shapes that the fortune cookies are making and the shadows.
I was in the moment.
You were in the moment, yeah, and you were very present. And I can see that with students. When I ask, what are you thinking? And they're like going, I wasn't thinking much. And I go, yeah, it kind of shows that way, Or if I ask you what you're thinking, you're like going, oh, I was really in the moment. I was getting involved with the shadows and lights. It's like, wow, All of a sudden, a fortune cookie isn't, such a bad model after all. Did a really nice job with this. Yeah, you will. If you take on painting your homework assignments like I request, you will love every minute of it. You'll hate every minute of it if you fight it. But if you do it just because you want to see what's there for you, you will get great results. Whose is this? Stefan. Now, what were you thinking?
I was fascinated with the texture of the fortune cookie, especially the broken part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to get that texture and lighting on it so that you would know exactly what it would taste like.
Awesome.
What does it say?
Now see, wait, you're jumping ahead of me. You're jumping ahead of me, but you have actually a point. What you said is wonderful. Because see, you're actually like plugging in to what is the texture, what is the flavor. Actually salivating, thinking about, how do I paint that? When we look at paintings of people who paint the wind, what does the wind look like? And so much like of what we paint should feel like sound, like if what does wind sound like, and paint thinking about that. And you can't paint thinking like that if you're worried about what you're going to make for dinner. You have to paint in that space. And when you think of breaking a fortune cookie, there is a definite sound. Okay? There is a sound. And you can be in a restaurant, and if you stop and listen for a minute, you can hear the breaking of fortune cookies all throughout the restaurant. But we're not aware of that. But we can't help but think about it without actually hearing it. And I think you actually even captured that sound, that feeling. And when you said the texture, absolutely. But like Chris said, the brain's a very fascinating thing. The brain wants to know why, how, what does that say? And so when you present things like this on here, first thing it says, patient, come to those who, I guess that's wait. See, what you've done is that you've given the brain something else. And in that process, you've lost that connection with your viewer. Because now they're no longer part of your painting, they're part of the fortune. And you've totally taken them, just like with Chris said, what does that fortune say? And you see how automatic that is? And when I first looked at it, the first thing I did, before I looked at that, is that I wanted to see what that says. Now with Marilyn, are we aware of the fortune?
No. So where it's there, it's heavy.
Yeah. And it probably is a fortune turner, it's probably the numbers or whatever like that. But it's so obscure and so blurred that we can get on with life. But if you go in and start changing the conversation to something, a proverb, then immediately I'm like going, be patient to those. And then I'm like going, but wait a minute, the paper's that long, and there really should be, half of it should be missing. What is in here? And so, and I start fitting, the brain starts to want to fix things. And so now we're off the conversation. So one of the things I would recommend is blur the words out. Because the great thing about the brain is if it's too complicated, we're so lazy, we just don't look at it. So like lawyers know this. Give them a big title and then just blur out the words at the bottom. Nobody wants to put their glasses on and go through it. Okay? So blur it out. So people are just like, oh no, I'm just going to look at it for what it is. It would be it. Perfect painting. Perfect painting except for the words. Interesting. Yes, nice piece.